fellow romance readers, I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah, and this is Post-Book Depression. You know that feeling you get when you finish a good book that you didn't want to end?
Have you finished a book and just weren't ready to move on from the story and its beloved characters? You find yourself needing just a little more? This multi-trope romance podcast gives you the opportunity to dig deeper with us into books we love as we discuss all the reasons we can't move on.
Feeling chatty? You can continue the conversation with us on Instagram at Post-Book Depression Podcast or on Facebook in our Post-Book Depression discussion group.
We would be so grateful if you would subscribe to our podcast and take a moment to leave a review.
Are you ready? Let's discuss.
Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Amy.
And I'm Sarah. Today we're going to be discussing Quiet, Beautiful Things by Samantha Christy.
The first few minutes we're going to do a brief review of the story without any spoilers. Then we are going to shift into a deeper book discussion that's going to include lots of spoilers, but don't worry, as always, we're going to let you know before we do shift into that deeper book discussion.
That's right. Amy, go ahead and tell us what the story is all about before we dive in.
A young man who learns he has a 4-year-old daughter will stop at nothing to provide her with the skills she needs to communicate. The young woman assigned to be his daughter's mentor and advocate quickly develops a connection with the man and his daughter. The single dad story has chemistry, swoon-worthy moments, and a male main character with the softest heart you'll ever see. Sarah, what did you think about Quiet, Beautiful Things?
I was intrigued by the story because it has a component to it that we have never discussed before. Finding out that he has a 4-year-old that cannot communicate in any way and having to navigate that was very intriguing to me. And I love a single dad romance.
Oh, me too.
I love a single dad romance.
I'm a sucker for that.
Yeah. But the story was it was very intriguing to me.
There's a learning component to this story that really had me engaged and intrigued. Just like you said, I felt the same way. All right, let's get into our ratings. Angst.
Okay, angst. This was a 1.5 for me. It wasn't overly angsty, but there was definitely some things that happened throughout that, kind of make you, what's going to happen?
I did a 1. There's an underlying story of suspense, but it is mostly drama more than suspense,
for sure.
Okay, humor.
This was just like a 1 for me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Not a comedy by any means, but there's some humor sprinkled
some chuckling moments.
Yeah. All right, spiciness.
Okay, I have to be clear on this. This is not because it's overly spicy, but I rated it a 2.5.
Okay.
And the reason
I'm intrigued.
The reason why I did that is because the male main character has a past, and his thought process is still a part of that.
That's true.
So just be warned, if that's an issue and stuff, know going in, this guy's going to think about stuff like every single chapter. Even if it's not happening, he's thought about it. And so, I was like, okay, so it's not because there's a ton of intimate scenes, because there's not.
Yeah.
It's more the
thought,
inner
dialogue,
the flirtation, the flirting that happens, but it's more his inner dialogue. There's a lot.
I did 1.5, so I was lower than you, but I can see your point of view, how the inner dialogue of the male main character.
Yeah, it's on his mind.
You're not wrong. Yeah. All right, tears.
Tears. This was like a 2 to 2.5 for me, because there's some stuff that you're just like, as a mom, I can't even. As a parent. Yeah. So there was.
You do have that parental connection that I don't have. I was lower. I did a 1. There are definitely some sad moments in the story and times that really tugged at my heartstrings. I teared up a few times, but it was more when I teared up, it was more in the sentimental moments than in the sad ones.
Yeah. I just kept thinking of how hard it would be for a 4-year-old to not be able to communicate with anybody. And then my mind just goes to a little girl of, what? We'll talk more about that in a deeper discussion.
That's fair.
There's some stuff. Guys, it's emotional.
Yeah, it is. All right, overall.
This was a 4. It was just it was one of those stories that I didn't expect. I didn't expect it to be what it was, I guess. And
I did 4.25. I loved the male main character and watching him evolve throughout the story, seeing him from the beginning of the story and kind of his involvement with the daughter and, of course, with the mentor and the connection that they have together. So That's why I gave it 4.25. All right, that concludes the spoiler-free quick review of the story. Now we're going to shift into a deeper book discussion, which is going to include lots of spoilers. So if you haven't read this story, stop, go check it out, and then come back and join us on that deeper discussion. Then we would love to connect with you on social media. We would love to hear all your thoughts about the story. You can find us on Instagram at Postbook Depression Podcast, on Facebook in our Postbook Depression discussion group, and you can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. In the opening scene of this story, we have Blake who's grocery shopping, and he looks over and makes eye contact with Ellie. And this is their first quote-unquote moment, or their connection that they have. He sees her walk away, and then a little bit later, they have another moment in the store. And so it kind of sets the tone for our introduction to Blake and Ellie and these little moments that they have with one another. Let's begin our conversation with these little moments and their initial connection, seeing each other.
Yeah, this is an intense kind of love at first sight. I mean, you don't realize it's a love at first sight kind of book, but I mean, it really does kind of turn into that, because
it does.
Their attraction is very immediate. They have immediate attraction, and then when they finally, are introduced, it just kind of carries on. They have a fast track to falling in love.
They do.
Super fast. But
Which normally I don't like an insta
You
love
don't.
story.
And the whole time I was reading this, I was like, Amy's gotta hate this. I can't believe she just doesn't do. She doesn't do insta love, and this is an insta love story.
It is definitely
an
insta
love story. But the component in it that we will discuss is, I think, what your focus immediately is sucked into. I know for me, that was my whole thing, because, you and I, we're not mega insta-love people, but every now and then we come across one, we're like, yeah,
I can get on board with that.
I can get on board with that. I totally, but yes, they had this initial attraction to one another. It was very intense.
It was intense.
Very,
I kind of felt heated in the moment just experiencing this as a reader.
Well, with his thought process, sure. Anyway.
That's true. The story quickly turns into Blake getting the news that he's a father. A PI shows up on his door, wants to ask him questions about his relationship with a woman named Lucinda 4 years ago. Turns out it was a one-night stand, and Lucinda's parents are trying to find the biological father of a 4-year-old little girl, which we later find out her name is Maisie. And the PI wants to do a DNA test to see if Blake is the father. He's, of course, willing and available to do that. He wants to accept this. If he is the father, he wants to take ownership of that, which I really appreciated that about him. And so he is on the verge of getting this news that he's a father. How did you feel in this moment?
I was really proud of him for taking responsibility and that he was willing to step up. Yes, I will do the DNA test. No problem. If this is my child, I want to take responsibility for it. That kind of helped me have a better liking for him because, we learned this guy's kind of got a little bit of a reputation.
Yeah.
So we know that he's
a player in the past.
He's a player and past-ish.
Yeah.
5-month dry spell's not much of a pass, but
until he meets Ellie.
And so, but I was proud of him for stepping up because some of the others, because I guess there's a few other options available, are more hesitant, and that was shocking to him, so I liked that part of his character, of that he was willing to do whatever. Okay, if this is my kid, I wasn't playing. I also love that he turned to his family and how supportive they are.
Yes.
That, hey, if you're a dad and you have a child coming, we're going to make this work. It's going to be okay. We're here for you. We support you. And I love that because that's how a family should be. In any circumstance, they should show support and love. And so I love that he had that support in his corner for him.
I do too. The family camaraderie that they had and just rallying behind him if he was a father, and just getting on board with just covering this little girl in love and showering her with affection really spoke to me a whole lot about the integrity of the family and just wanting to do the right thing and really just giving this little girl a life that she's missed out on, which at that point they don't know the extent of.
Exactly.
Real briefly, I just want to mention on the sidelines, over in Ellie's point of view, we're learning that she's new to town. She's just moved here and she's getting ready to start a job. At this point, we don't know the extensiveness of the job and what her responsibilities are going to be. She just merely mentions that she's starting a new job very close to where she's living. So we're getting that a little bit on the sidelines as well. Let's go back to Blake getting Maisie and their first realizations of neglect and her inability to communicate and her deafness. Let's spend a few minutes just talking about this scene.
Well, I mean, they can tell just by looking at her, this child has not been well cared for. You know, she looks a little rough, and they assume nobody knows for a fact that she is in fact deaf.
Which I forgot to mention, Lucinda is in rehab. So Maisie's mother is in rehab. She's going to be there for an extended period of time, and they did let Blake know that after rehab, she'll have full parental rights back into the picture. So that explains a little bit.
And the grandparents are wanting to leave her with the father because they want to go on a cruise.
Which, oh my gosh.
So you can kind of get an idea of
That's the groundwork.
Yeah, it definitely lets you know what kind of environment she's coming from. But she looks uncared for. She's unkept, and she's 4, and she can't communicate in any way at all. And so it's very heartbreaking, that initial meeting, because she doesn't know how to sign. She doesn't know anything.
Yeah, she doesn't even know what being deaf means.
Right. And they don't even have confirmation of that. Thankfully, the dad has a friend that they were able to call in and have him look her over and check. And then they take her to the doctor and confirm that she is, in fact,
profoundly deaf.
And then they just leap right into action. But I love when they get her, how the mom is taking notes of everything she's going to need, and that the sister and I believe it's one of the brothers, they go out and they get all the things that she needs. And by the time the evening is done, this girl has an entire room set up and ready for her.
Like she'd been there the whole time.
Like she had been there. I mean, everything, like toys and books and
food,
everything, clothes. I just thought, oh, that's a very long shopping spree. That's all I had in my mind. Which is like, go to Target, they'll have everything. I was like, they would have everything. But man,
that would be more than one basket.
That would be exhausting. I mean, absolutely exhausting. But this family they leap into action. And it's just incredible. It's incredible to see. And you can tell they're overwhelmed with the news, but
it's very heartbreaking to think about a 4-year-old child who's had such a lonely life the first 4 years, not being able to communicate. And that's where a lot of the sadness to the story comes in. When you think about everything that Maisie's gone through up till now, kind of I don't know so much if it's the fearfulness. We do get a little bit of glimpses of her having some fearfulness when she makes mistakes or messes up on different things. But just the loneliness of not having a way to communicate with anyone else in the world just guts me.
There are so many, at points, there's things that are said that when you really stop to think, and he is thinking about before she's given words to understand what words are, to think is how quiet her mind would have been. I cried when I read that part because I just I don't understand what it's like to be deaf. That's one of the things they keep talking about. You will never understand what it's like to be deaf. You'll never understand what it's like to hear.
Yeah, like a hearing person cannot never fully experience complete deafness or not having any sound at all.
Well, and the closest they said was a man who went into a padded room, but he could
still hear his heartbeat.
He could hear his heartbeat. And that hit me because we don't know what it truly means to have quiet.
Right.
When I was trying to process that and comprehend that, I hurt for this little girl of having so many emotions and so many feelings, but not even knowing how to convey that you're feeling these things.
Right.
You don't even know how to describe that. Yeah, it was just really sad. And
you mentioned the family and how they kind of rally together in this support system way to give her everything that she needs when she comes back from the doctor and is going to be living at home with Blake. It's in these moments that we realize Blake is doing his very best. He doesn't know. He's never been a father. He's never really been around a little girl. He doesn't know what to do, as any first-time parent would be. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of unknown. But from the reader's point of view, we're understanding the lengths that Blake is going to give her a good life, and he's giving her his very best. From the moment he learns about her, he steps up to the plate to be the best father he knows how. So it's very interesting when we have Blake and Ellie's official first meet cute, when she comes over and she's been assigned as this mentor to help Maisie, and comes in guns a-blazing, quote unquote, and there's this disastrous meet cute where she is accusing him of neglect and calling Child Protective Services. And let's just talk about this really disastrous meet cute. Usually we're gushing over a meet cute, not this one.
I was so appalled with her behavior. I kept thinking, first of all, you are being incredibly unprofessional right now. Secondly, calm down. They're Target bags. It's not trash.
There was the broken glass too, where she steps on the glass, but still,
things happen.
It doesn't warrant neglect.
No, it did not. And I just thought to myself, lady, calm down. But then, so I was not happy with Ellie in this moment.
No, me neither.
Like, at all. I just did
My notes was not favorable for her in this moment.
No, it was not.
At all.
But then when she sits there and later is thinking about it, she's thinking, I can't believe I behaved that way. I can't believe I went off the handle that way. I've never treated a client this way. And so when she kind of had that remorse and recognized that she was jumping to conclusions, I was like, okay, Ellie, good girl.
And he calls her out on it too. He explains, I've been doing my very best. I just learned. And then when she realizes this and said, I was not relayed any of that information, but still, you jump to conclusions here.
She really did. And I just thought, maybe ask questions instead of just assuming. Because you know what they say about assuming.
Oh, yes.
And she definitely made one of herself.
Very true. I love the way, though, that Ellie starts to have this connection with Maisie. Maisie sees Ellie for the first time. Ellie's got her bag of flashcards and some tools and things that she's hoping to try and expose Maisie to help give her the option to communicate and learn through these processes with drawings and teaching her the signs. I loved this initial, I guess, kind of a meet cute between Maisie and Ellie, where they first meet for the first time. And that's really where the rapport between them, the foundation is laid for the two of them. Let's talk about this opening scene between Maisie and Ellie.
That for me was really what got me hooked into this story, was that bond that they have, and that the way that Ellie was able to build a relationship so quickly with Maisie, that she was able to bring her out of her shell, to be able to explain things to her in a way that the little girl could understand. I love that they did it through drawings and pictures.
Me too.
That I just kept thinking in my mind, how are they going to teach her? Because I don't have knowledge of the deaf community and how they go about doing anything. And so for me, this was just really, I don't know, it was enlightening to kind of witness on page how this may happen for a child to learn. And yeah, I loved their relationship. I love that she felt safe with her. I did hurt for Blake because he initially could see that they were establishing a very fast bond.
Especially with the hugging.
Right. But I also admired Ellie because she was trying to
She recognized that.
She recognized immediately and would try to establish, okay, this is your dad. You stay here with him.
Clear boundaries.
Yeah, she definitely had her boundaries in place, and I appreciated that. But what did you think of their relationship?
I really admired the fact that she was trying to be very mindful of the connection that she had with Maisie and not overstep her bounds and confuse Maisie about what was happening. She wasn't a mother figure to Maisie. She was a mentor and an advocate for her in her communication and learning, and she wanted to be that for her. So I also really loved watching them grow and the learning options that she taught her. I also enjoyed the drawing and things like that, and just the creative ways that Ellie presented learning options for Maisie, I thought was very cool, especially for a 4-year-old. You've got someone who's, young as it is, but also starting from scratch. They don't know literally anything. And we do learn that her job that she's starting is going to be at the local deaf school that's in town. And so she encourages Blake to get Maisie enrolled in pre-K and really start exposing her to other children her age with the same circumstances that Maisie's going through and learning how to communicate. Because up till now, she's had literally nobody but Lucinda around her. So she doesn't know social interactions. She doesn't know, I mean, besides just the rudimentary physical things that she needs, there's a lot of social things that she's severely lacking. And the first 5 years is incredibly important for kids to learn.
Right. I thought it was also interesting, and I don't think that we've really made mention the fact that Ellie herself is deaf.
Yes.
And she can read lips. So I thought it was interesting that she had an interpreter with her, because when she's flying off the handle on Blake,
it's not really Hannah, her interpreter.
Being verbal, even though she can talk, she chooses not to.
Yes.
But she's telling the interpreter, and the interpreter is relaying.
And I can imagine it would be confusing for someone learning a deaf environment and how, like, you're addressing the deaf person and not the interpreter. You're speaking to Ellie here and not Hannah. I can imagine, especially in a heated moment like that, where you would be confused and just talking. You're like, Hannah's the one speaking out loud, so he's reciprocating to her. I can imagine how confusing that would be.
There was so much that I just never, I feel like sometimes when it's not your world, you are ignorant to not understanding if you're not exposed to it. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with not understanding and not knowing, but I do think it's good to educate yourself.
Absolutely.
When you're made aware of, okay, if I'm ever put in this situation. For instance, I thought it would, like with the interpretation, he kept wanting to talk to the interpreter or look at the interpreter, but she wanted him to look at her. I also thought it was interesting with some basic things to flip the light on when you enter a room so that they know you're in the room, to always turn your body towards them so that they can see that they know that you're talking. And it never occurred to me, of course, I've never been in a situation where this has even been something that I would have to be concerned about, not to my knowledge anyway, that the amount of conversations that just go on around people who are deaf and nobody stops to think.
That was really eye-opening to me and enlightening. And even the list that she gave him of things not to do.
I know.
It blew my mind, Sarah. Just the things that you just don't know if you're not ever exposed to that or never in a situation about that, the things that we take for granted and ways that you can be mindful about people with differences and trying to adapt and include in any situation and opportunity. My aunt and uncle, they live in a deaf community and they have some summer camps and things for deaf kids. And so I was exposed to this community at a very young age, not extensively. And it has always been fascinating to me. They would teach me American Sign Language on some things. And so I had a real basic knowledge of this, but I found this story incredibly fascinating because there were whole links and levels that I never even considered.
I just felt, when he says, after she gives him the list to her, he looks up and he looks kind of distraught, really kind of upset. And he said, I've broken every single one of these already. Like, how am I going to do this? I appreciated that he was able to, one, acknowledge that, but I also appreciated her saying, you didn't know. And I do feel like you have to show some grace because we do have kind of two different worlds. If you're not a part of it, you don't know. You know? And so I was thankful that Ellie helped him to recognize, hey, this is not something you've been exposed to. You didn't know, but now you know. So now you do better.
And he was so eager to learn American Sign Language. And Sarah, it blew my mind when she said 70% of parents with deaf children don't learn sign language. I thought, oh my goodness, how do they communicate to an extensive level if they don't?
You know, I would say it would surprise me, but it doesn't. I had something with relation to what my family walks through with our kids. And my doctor said to me, I love that you're doing this. And I said, why wouldn't I? And she goes, you would be shocked of the amount of parents that don't.
Like making adaptions for your kids' needs and things like that. Wow.
And I just was blown away. So in that, I was kind of with Blake, what do you mean? What do you mean? But then I thought, wow, but I felt like it's not so much. I think the part that kind of would blow my mind of people, not so much the parents, that one shocked me. Like, who is not learning if you have a deaf child? What? No. But to me, it would be the grandparents and the aunts and the uncles not wanting to try.
I love the effort of this family wanting to include Maisie and make her feel a part of the family and show some effort, an extensive effort at that.
I know. Like whenever the aunt learns and she is signing and they're trying to have conversation, and even the uncle who is not around because of the tragedy in his own personal life, but he comes up and she says, "Oh, you know sign language." And he said, "My niece is deaf. Why wouldn't I?" Something to that effect. And I was like, ooh, okay. And I appreciated that so much because that just goes to show the love that this family has for their granddaughter and their niece. And
it's something special.
It is very much something special.
Let's talk about Ellie and Blake. I know we've just kind of briefly mentioned that she's very conscious about not overstepping the perception of being a mother figure in Maisie's life. So even when her and Blake have this chemistry and their relationship is starting to develop, she's very, very conscientious of not having any kind of physical relationship with Blake anytime Maisie's around. So let's just talk a little bit about their relationship and how it's starting to develop.
I did have a little bit of an issue with this.
Okay.
Because just not that they didn't have attraction. I do feel like that would be hard to fight because they had that intense moment. But I did kind of feel like if this was real life and you had a 4-year-old
a new 4-year-old.
Yeah, a new 4-year-old dropped on your doorstep that had no form of communication whatsoever, I feel like you would be so overwhelmed with all of the things. I don't know that you would have time to entertain your attraction.
I think that's a valid point. I'm going to counter that just by saying...
You need a moment of reprieve?
Well, not even that, but here is this woman that you've already had like a Insta connection with moments here with you 3 times a week. You're spending time together. You're building a friendship initially, even though you've got that attraction there that's kind of elevating a little bit.
Yeah.
So I could see where there was a little bit of dabbling in there.
I could see it. I just struggled with it a little bit.
I know.
I know. That was a hard. I was like, man. I really don't know that this is where your focus should be right now, dude.
This is where your side of being a parent and me not elevates your feelings a little bit more. I'm a little more forgiving of that, although if it was my reality, I 100% agree with you.
I had to remind, I did have a little vent fest with my husband because I was like, where is his head at? Where is his head? I know where his head is at. It's in the past. It's in the past, Blake. And so anyway, okay, guys, everybody, I know everybody has their opinion, but I did have to recognize this is fiction.
Yes, it is.
And you do make a good point. They're together a few times a week, and it's not like that attraction would go away.
No.
Anyway.
But we also have from Ellie's perspective, she has a hesitation with dating a hearing man. So even though they have a chemistry and they're starting to kind of build and develop a relationship, one, she's thinking about his past and wondering if the relationship that's starting to grow between them is just going to be a fling or if it's a little bit something more. But then also the hesitation of dating a hearing man, because we come to find out that she has feelings that all hearing men want her to change. They want her to try and speak. They want her to live as a hearing person when she, in fact, does not hear.
Right. I felt I could understand her hesitation because of his past, because he
sowed some oats.
A lot of oats. He has a reputation, and people have brought that to her attention. With that being said, do I feel like people can have a past and then change and all of a sudden want to be committed and monogamous and have a future with a person? Absolutely. I do believe that people can have a past and then enter into a very committed relationship. But I understand her hesitation, because for me, I would be right there with her. I'd be like, I don't know. You've been with a lot.
Yeah.
You've been with so many people that you have a major reputation, and he doesn't deny it. He owns up to it. But I did not understand until she explains that to him, that she's had some issues in the past with men who could hear and wanting her to change, and kind of, she was bullied. And so once I hear that reasoning, but when she first says, I could never be with you because you can hear, I was kind of taken back, because I was like him, like, what?
Yeah, I was the same.
I didn't like that. But then when she explains it, I thought, okay, well, that's from trauma.
And he makes the mistake of trying to call her the one time because he forgot.
Yeah.
So there are some things, little signs and things that she's thinking about and dwelling on, which are a few hangups that she has.
I do feel like, though, if this was a real life couple, I would like to think that there would be grace extended on both sides.
Yeah, I agree.
Because just like, you know, you're not going to understand everything with the deaf community, you're not going to understand everything with the hearing community. And both mistakes are going to be made on both sides. Probably more so on the side of the person who can hear. Yeah. I would think.
I think so too.
But at the same time, if you've never been exposed to that, I don't really feel like that's fair to get real upset. Now, if it's a continuing thing and they're not adapting to living with life with having a deaf partner, then yeah, I could see where that would be a major issue. Hello.
Yeah, I agree. Maisie's making great progress. She's started school. She's making friends. She's learning very quickly. And we learned from Ellie that getting your name sign as a deaf person is like a rite of passage. And only someone in the deaf community can assign a name sign to you. And I want to talk about Maisie getting her name sign because this was such a special moment, and Ellie getting to witness that and then relaying that to Blake was really, really special.
That was so sweet. That little boy at school.
And it having to do with her curls.
I know, because I could just picture this adorable little blonde curly haired girl. So sweet. Yeah, that was a special moment.
I really loved watching her progress, and even the dynamic between Maisie and Ellie as she's learning and growing more. Blake still is witnessing her connect with other people far more than himself. He's having concerns about her not understanding that he's her father and what even a father is. And so Ellie is working very hard to explain this as best as she can to Maisie about him being the father. And it takes a good amount of time, really, for Maisie to start to warm up to Blake.
I know. That was really kind of sad because he's doing everything he can. He's learning at a rapid pace to be able to communicate with her. And the fact that she just doesn't. And when he sees her hugging other people, which we've mentioned, it just
is heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was just really hard to read.
One of the side aspects of this story is Ellie. She has a sister, but then she also learns about a half-sister that she has. Now, we haven't really talked about Ellie's family dynamic and how her father and mother are no longer together. Her father, Grant, had abused her mother and she got out of that relationship. And it is midway through the story that we learn that she has a half-sister who's named Sierra. And Sierra's mother is currently with Grant, Ellie's father. Let's talk a little bit about her learning about this sister, them meeting, and what's happening here.
Well, it was shocking because she kept receiving calls from somebody and she knew it was somebody that obviously did not know her personally because they wouldn't have called her.
Correct.
When she discovers that she gets this voicemail and has Blake listen to it and he types out the whole voicemail for her to read. So it was just shocking to know that she had another sister, and the fact that her sister's mom and her, I mean, they've been with her biological father her whole life, and she's grown up in that environment, vastly different from what Ellie knew. Ellie's mom married a very good man and has a sister and a wonderful family. They're extremely close. And to know that she has another sister, that her life has been completely different, was really sad.
Well, I gotta be honest. I was a little suspicious of Sierra to begin with. Okay.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure her motives here. And then Ellie later explains that Sierra doesn't know about their wealth, their family wealth and things like that. So I stepped back a little bit from my suspicion.
Right.
I did appreciate that Blake offered to go with her when she meets Sierra for the first time, as kind of just to sit on the sidelines and observe in case anything comes up. I really liked that Ellie and Sierra had an instant bond and were able to kind of pick up from as if they'd known each other their whole life and really establish a new relationship as sisters together.
Yeah.
It's over the course of time that Sierra comes to stay with Ellie, and we learn about Tara, who's Sierra's mother. We mentioned who has been with Grant. And they're trying to make arrangements for Tara to leave Grant. The problem is he's on the police force, and so leaving is not as easy as you would think it is. And so they make arrangements. Ellie has this plan to get Tara out of that situation and to come get her a job at the school with her. They pull it off, essentially. But the importance of being able to be successful in this is that they can't tell anyone.
Right.
Literally no one. It's the three of them that know, and that's it. And so Ellie is harboring this secret. Blake's starting to pick up on different clues about how something's not quite right with Ellie, and he's wondering if maybe there's someone else or what's happening here. Let's talk a little bit just about this. It's not really a conflict, but it kind of is. It kind of leads to a little bit of a miscommunication. So I just want to talk briefly about that.
Well, I mean, he does kind of have a reason to think that it could be somebody else because there is a guy that works at the school with her who is deaf, who asks her to go out, and then she declines, but then she ends up going to that exact restaurant with all of Blake's family to celebrate something for Maisie, and the guy runs into her there. And so that kind of, sparked some suspicion.
A little bit of doubt.
And just like what's going on. And she's acting kind of strange. She's late and then she's hesitant and all these things. So I could see where he's wondering what is happening.
And when he asks her about it, she says everything's fine. She's thinking about other things.
Right.
One thing we haven't talked about with Maisie is her little stuffed cat that she brings with her. It's like her security blanket. And she really loves cats. I love this about her, even though I'm more of a dog person. I love this for Maisie. And she has this little stuffed cat, and they decide, Maisie and Blake, I mean, Maisie doesn't really understand fully, but Blake decides that he wants to get her a little kitten. And they go to this shelter to find a kitten. And Sarah, I love that she connected with this kitten that they end up naming Bolt, who has a congenital defect on its leg. And that is her connection. And they both they have differences and they bond over that. And she doesn't even care, which I absolutely love about her. Let's talk about her connection to cats.
I thought it was really sweet because it's obviously something that brings her an immense amount of comfort. When she doesn't understand when they're at the shelter that she gets to take the cat, she looks kind of sad. And so Blake gets down and is communicating with her that this cat is coming with us. And
that's when she hugs him for the first time. Oh, melted my heart.
Well, I teared up because I was the moment was so profound. I just love that she just has this connection. And the lady at the shelter says it's a match made in heaven. Yeah, I just think it's so sweet that she just has this comfort. And then the cat just follows her everywhere.
I know.
Their little
like
butts.
two peas in a pod.
It's really sweet.
I love the connection that they have too. And then she wants the cat to sleep with her, which I just love that. Lucinda ends up reaching out to Blake about having him bring Maisie to family day in this rehab center. There was a lot of angst and anxiety for Blake in this moment because he's trying to think through the logistics of that and the progress that Maisie's had. He's not wanting her to have any setbacks, but he also feels like he deserves a conversation with Lucinda about what's happening and her plans for the future. In the end, he decides to go visit Lucinda by himself, which kudos to him. That was the right choice.
I kept thinking, if you take that little girl, and then when he finally comes to the realization he's going to go by himself, I'm like, finally, you're thinking like a parent. Oh my goodness. I just thought if he takes that little girl to her trauma, your tormentor, because clearly that's where a lot of her trauma is from. You have just all the things that you've done to be the best dad for her, all the things you've learned, that all just goes right out the window for me.
Yeah.
If you take that little girl to just face to face, because I just kept imagining the confusion that she would experience. So it didn't happen. Whew.
I know. I was glad.
And he was saved by grace because I was just so thankful he did not do that.
She does communicate to Blake that she's dying and she has no plans to continue her parental rights with Maisie, which I fully expected a whole courtroom. I was very thankful that we didn't have to live through that because the angst would have skyrocketed.
We're horrible people. We're so glad she died. And we didn't even have to deal with that. I mean, can you imagine? Oh, Lord, that's awful.
It is awful. This is fictitious story.
I know, but she was awful to her little girl.
Was.
Not that justifies somebody, not that I wish ill on people, but, I kind of felt like Blake did. Where it's like, I'm not happy that you're dying.
Correct.
But he also had the relief of, I don't have to battle you. She's mine. Like his relief when he realizes Maisie's his is just...
that warmed my heart so much. Oh, such a good
obviously
moment.
The grandparents are not going to be an issue.
No.
They were clearly not good parents anyway.
He's looking for a bigger house. He's realizing that the house that he's currently in isn't really going to be the best for them in the long term. He's also really wanting Ellie to be a part of his family and wants them to be together. And so he does some house hunting. First, I love that there is another little boy and a mom in the same cul-de-sac that shares the same situation as Maisie, and they have that connection, or they will have that connection. I love that. Kind of seals the deal on this house. And then he invites Ellie to move in with them, and she tells him no. So let's talk just briefly about this scene here. This is also where she dives into, which we've already talked about, her hesitation of dating a hearing man. So that does play a role in her decision to say no in this moment.
Right. Well, I did not think he should be asking her to move in. I thought the fact that he was even looking for houses that were going to accommodate her, I was like, well, it's only been a few months, so let's pump the brakes, Blakey poo. So
that's valid.
I, like Ellie, would have ran. So run, girl, run. I mean, I was fine with her saying no. I was, but
I was too.
I was not fine with her saying she could not be with a guy who could hear.
Yeah.
And I thought,
I agree.
I'll leave it at that. I didn't like that.
We shift over to the scene where Ellie's at her house and Grant shows up. We come to learn that Sierra made a mistake in the plan that they have, and she texts the wrong phone number, which alerted Grant to the fact that she's in contact with her mother, and so he knew where to find her. He shows up at Ellie's place, and Sarah, this scene it made me sick to my stomach. The things that he did to her, the way he treated her. Let's quickly talk about this scene.
Okay, well, let's just address it. He pours boiling coffee on her hands.
Oof, yes. Which is her means to communicate, as we all know.
Well, she's talking and he's yelling at her to shut up because she's using her actual voice. And just you just get a small taste of what her mom endured and why her mom got out. But it just escalates to a level that it's so bad. And thankfully, Blake shows up and Tara finds the gun because they have a little scramble, and Tara finds a gun and she shoots him.
Yes, she does.
Gets rid of that problem.
Yes.
Can I say that?
Sure.
She eliminates the threat. She eliminates the threat.
She eliminates the threat.
Way. But Ellie is severely hurt, and Blake is beside himself. And
yes.
So
I liked watching his reaction to her and taking care of her and just being mindful of her. There were a lot of swoon-worthy moments for me in my mind of Blake through this story. I know you were a little bit slower to get on board with them, but I was a big fan of some of the things that he did, and I really liked this moment of them together and him trying to take care of her, basically get her out of that situation.
This moment was really sweet, and it wasn't that they couldn't have the connection. I was more in the focus of the parent side of it.
Yeah, absolutely, which is valid.
So the romance of this for me kind of took a backseat. The second I learned there's a 4-year-old that couldn't communicate, I was like, I don't know if we should. I was more in love with the love story of the father falling in love with the daughter than focused on the love story of the couple for me.
That's valid, and I think that was a primary focus for me as well. And I think that's also why the story resonated a little bit more with me, because of the relationship that they had together. And we get the added benefit of Blake and Ellie together as well. And kind of the dynamic of the three of them together.
Which I think in the end, in the long run, because they do get a happily ever after, is that it makes a beautiful family. That Maisie's going to grow up in a home with a mom who understands her and can, connect with her, and that he is going to have a partner who can teach him.
Yeah.
And I mean, can you imagine the amount of the wealth of knowledge he's going to gain from having this relationship with somebody who is deaf, and she can communicate how their daughter's going to feel. And, it just, so in the end, it all makes perfect sense. And the family comes together the way they should. After.
I do love that there are two things in this ending that I want to just briefly mention as we close out this episode. One was the soundproof room that he adds.
Goodness. Okay,
to the
that
house
made me swoon.
With the vibrations for both Ellie and Maisie.
I know.
Oh, loved that. And then when they're in their wedding, after they exchange vows, she speaks her vows and he signs the vows, which melted my heart. I also, side note, loved that he hired an interpreter for his brother's wedding just for her. Oh, see, lots of swoon things for me.
I know.
And then I love at the end of their wedding ceremony that the whole audience does jazz hands, which is applause in American Sign Language.
When she looked out and she saw that, I just thought that was so beautiful. I was like, okay, that is somebody who is just... Yeah. He's taken it over the top. It's just really
loved it.
Really beautiful. That wraps up our discussion of Quiet Beautiful Things. We hope you enjoyed this discussion and want to continue the conversation with us. You can hit us up on Instagram at Postbook Depression Podcast or on Facebook in our Postbook Depression discussion group. You can also email us at postbookdepressionpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time, keep reading.